And as you look at the chart, if you look at the chart, there is a big variation. Looking at a county with a very small caseload is probably a small number, a law of large numbers problems, and a lot of the outliers that you've talked about are actually in those counties. Still, if you get rid of them, the spread is too wide and the rate is too low. So being forthright about that. But as we have the discussion, the difference between 10 and 100, for some of those most of those counties on the ends, they're pretty small. For the rest, the spread is still too wide.
Senator Allen?
Okay, I just had two different questions about these charts. I'm trying to understand these charts. So the first one is this chart on child care utilization rates by county, and I'm just focused on the final two columns on the far right, and I'm just trying to understand how to interpret these utilization rates, just so I'm clear in understanding the problem that we're discussing right now. So one of them has a utilization rate based on use for budgeting, another one's one that's based on eligible children. I tried to read the footnotes and I'm having trouble. So tell me so let's say LA County, for example, is 26% utilization rate used for budgeting, but a 37% utilization rate based on eligible children. Sure. Can someone explain that to me?
Sure. We've been trying to really work on our utilization rate and getting a number that I think people are more comfortable with. We still have some more work to do there. The furthest column that you have there really does include the CalWORKs families with an age-eligible child for childcare. The other column does not. So it includes all of the CalWORKs families participating, even if maybe their child is 13, 14, So again, the last column really reflects those that have an age-eligible child for childcare purposes.
So the far right is the most appropriate one to use.
Yes.
So why do we even put in that first one there?
I think this particular chart was used for a variety of purposes. So again, we can make that clearer in the future for you.
Okay.
Ignore.
And Senator Allen, if I might, what the far right column doesn't account for are families with age-eligible children who are not eligible for childcare because perhaps they're school age, or they're in a two-parent family where the CalWORKs program is structured in a way where the second parent is expected to take care of the kids. So this is any family, because I think that's the best the data can provide. The other thing the last column doesn't include are, I think it's about 19 or 20,000 kids who are CalWORKs aided children who are receiving child care in the general child care system, but not in one of the stages. So the actual utilization rates, if we're going to sort of compare apples and oranges and look at the absolute rate, those accommodations need to be made because they do understate the actual degree of utilization.
That's sort of, I mean, that's kind of the takeaway of that second to last column, that there are folks,
even the last column doesn't make those accommodations.
Right. That's what I mean. And that's why the second to last column is lower rate, is a lower percentage than in the right column. Okay, that's helpful. Now, the other question I had is about the chart on page 15 of our packet that lays out statewide allocations versus expenditures of counties, single allocation for 14-15. And I'm just trying to get an understanding of eligibility administration and why that is such a high portion, and why it is that the expenditures are so much higher than the allocation in that line item that seems to be far, or at least further, from the core work of child care and employment services.
So CalWORKs is funded as a block grant with those three components. That first component, those are the eligibility workers that do intake. That's the work of getting the check out. That's the work of doing the redetermination. So we're spending, it's an Amber Alert, sorry.
So we're spending $620 million just getting the checks out?
Fire alarm.
Yes, hundreds of thousands. It's a huge amount of work processing applications, processing all of the mandatory requirements. It's a program that still requires a lot of in-person work as opposed to some other programs. And in some ways, it's the least, it's the one that's hardest to affect because the bottom line legal requirements about making sure every person that applies has their application reviewed, has a decision made accurately, has a check issued to them timely. That is a huge chunk of the CalWORKs program. Prior to CalWORKs, it was virtually the entire AFDC program. The welfare to work and childcare components were tiny prior to welfare reform vis-a-vis the eligibility administration, but it is indeed core. It's the core way we get a huge amount of assistance to the poorest kids in the state.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I clearly need to learn more about this. I mean, I'm wondering whether this suggests that there's room for streamlining so that more of that money can actually go towards supporting the very people we're looking to help.
Or it suggests that we should adjust the way we budget to reflect what the accurate need is to do eligibility. And
It seems to be a kind of a chronic problem. It's all $100 million over.
because it's a block grant, in some ways it doesn't mean anything. The state budgets the three components. They show it to you separately, but when the money gets to the county, it's a block grant. And because the county can use funds across the functions in that chart, the imperative doesn't exist necessarily from a budgeting standpoint to get it perfect, because the counties have the ability to fund the activities within that block grant. You could alternatively try to budget each component separately. We wouldn't recommend that. Yeah. You could adjust the budgeting formulas to try to get each block correct. But as Senator Mitchell pointed out, the program went through such a huge change during the recession. We took $400 million a year for 4 years out of welfare to work and childcare and told people with young children, stay home. And we're just now in the process of putting the program back to where what it looked like prior to the recession. And so I don't know that we're at the point where we can be super precise about what we think the numbers ought to be, but the fact that it's overspent doesn't mean the counties are spending too much money getting money into the hands of poor families.
Yeah, I get it. It just seems an extraordinarily high amount of overhead for a typical government program, given that the money should go, that our sense of spending money in this area is to get it to those poor families, right? So, but I understand maybe there's just a whole extra set of bureaucratic eligibility requirements.
I would be happy to
get an invitation to a county welfare office or a APR in our agency to help you walk through and visualize what that process is.
And I'd be very happy to talk more with you about what specifically goes into the eligibility process and where those costs come from and what it takes, and the incredibly numerous rules and requirements that we put recipients through because you guys tell us to.
Well, yeah, and that's what I mean.
And so those, no, I appreciate the sincerity of your interest in my return sort of offer to spend more time providing additional information.
I wouldn't be surprised, like we do in so many ways. We've added, I wouldn't be surprised if we've added on all sorts of rules and requirements that jam your folks up that don't end up making a big difference in real meaningful eligibility determination that ends up putting money in an area where the money's not going out the door to the folks we're trying to help. So, but I'd love to come down and see it.
I think one of the previous AP administrators talked about, the historic notion of fraud and all the extra hoops we asked families to jump through that really ultimately, over years of following, didn't lead to much. The Women's Caucus proposal to streamline eligibility to 12 months. I mean, so I think there are streamlining examples that are on the table that.
And we ought to be able to, turn to this and make the case to some of our friends that there's an opportunity for significant government cost savings associated with that sort of eligibility streamlining.
No question.
If I could make one observation, though, Senator Allen, if you look at the chart on page 5, the items. 15. The items, childcare, Cal Learn, employment services, that's the employment services side of the CalWORKs program. In total, the CalWorks program has 1.7 million residents of the state who are aided in the program. The vast majority of them aren't in the Welfare to Work program, but the eligibility services component carries the whole program.
Okay.
So in a sense, if you factored the eligibility function to the Welfare to Work population, it's probably a quarter of the eligibility amount at the top.
That's helpful to know.
And I know this is a joint hearing, so it's sort of, this is a sub-3 type sort of comment and input, but if you stack up the major programs that we administer in self-sufficiency, CalWorks, CalFresh, and Medi-Cal, you see some very different things in terms of the requirements.
Yes.
And by far, CalWorks is the program where we require the most. That's a matter of state policy. For example, in Medi-Cal, you can do a redetermination over the phone. Can't do redetermination over the phone in CalWorks. You make us see the person. That takes longer. And as a matter of policy, I'm not trying to distract Senator Block from the child care focus, because I know that is important, but to the extent that the opportunity has been offered to me, the opportunity to streamline the program by taking advantage of things that we're willing to do in Medi-Cal but not willing to do in CalWorks would be a discussion that we would love to participate in.
I feel an interim field trip coming on. I feel it. Any other questions of this panel? One quick, if Department of Social Services, page 16, the question posed, if not funded, by what other measures can the state determine whether a county is effectively offering child care?
Again, I think we want to get back to the question that you have about I think the utilization rate is certainly a measure that we should continue to look at. I think we need to think about the data components, the methodology we're using, and the additional subsidized child care access that the families are using as well. But again, I think the conversation will continue about what should the actual threshold, what should the number be that we're targeting. We don't think it's 100% because we, again, know that families are going to choose other informal arrangements, but certainly something we'll continue to explore.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the panels and the active interest in stage 1 utilization. I don't say that facetiously. I appreciate that because it's something that we've got to figure out. It's a conundrum and it shouldn't be. Moving on to issue 6, last but certainly not least, are the proposals for investment. And we already heard Senator Jackson present on behalf of the Women's Caucus. And so we'll be hearing on from the others, and you know who you are. Child Care Law Center, SEIU, R&R Network, Child Care Alliance of LA, and First Five of California. Did I get everybody? Because we've already heard from. As is reflected in the agenda, the subcommittees received these budget requests for consideration. For context, in addition to the following proposals, the Budget Subcommittee 3 on April 21st will consider proposals that assist foster parents and caregivers across subsidized child care. Since we've already heard from Senator Jackson, we'll move on to Child Care Law Center to hear their proposal on 12-month eligibility, state median income, rates, and slots.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Chair, and the committee. I want to thank you both for your
Hit your mic button. There you go.
How's that?
Perfect.
Thank you. And as you know, I am Patty Prunhuber from the Child Care Law Center. I want to thank you for this very thoughtful conversation and for your stamina. I will try to be brief. But it's been a very thoughtful discussion. The Child Care Law Center has analyzed this year's budget priorities in light of state and federal legal requirements to ensure that low-income children have equal access to a range of quality, affordable, and stable child care. This analysis drives us to recommend a 3-pronged strategy, which you've heard multiple times this morning, of increasing reimbursement rates, adding slots, and implementing family-friendly policies. In making this recommendation, I want to underscore the extraordinary unity of the child care stakeholder community in support of this approach. And I believe you received an April 4th letter, which is signed by over 100 organizations. The community is further unified in endorsing the full amount and priorities within the Legislative Women Caucus's $800 million budget request. The Child Care Law Center recommends prioritizing the expenditure of new funds in these three key areas as follows. First, adopt the 12-month eligibility and the updated income guidelines. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail. You've heard a lot about it, but I want to make clear that current state law requires an eligibility determination at least every 12 months. It's a ceiling, not a floor, between the length of redeterminations. In reality, families must report within 5 days any changes in income, family size, school schedule, even if these changes have no effect on eligibility. As a result, many eligible families lose their child care before the 12 months has run, and it's usually for procedural reasons. These reporting rules place unnecessary burdens on working parents and cause eligible families to churn in and out of child care families. Moving to a protected 12-month eligibility period, so long as the income doesn't exceed the federal income limits, will ensure more stable child care for children and will also improve parents' ability to succeed in the workplace. As you've heard, it is also required under the newly reauthorized CCDBG Act. And I want to say that federal officials have made clear that California needs to come into compliance. I am very gratified to hear that CDE is moving in that direction and is recommending that either through this budget process or through legislation that we accomplish that result, and that the only reason for their request for a waiver was for additional time.
30 seconds.
Thank you. I also want to say that updating the eligibility guidelines to reflect current census data, not relying on the state median income from 2005, is critical. It will allow continuity of care while allowing for modest wage growth. And given that we are having increases in the minimum wage, it will ensure that we do not inadvertently cut subsidies for families whose incomes remain too low. This approach will again allow us to implement CCDBG rules, and I believe, Senator Mitchell, you've said many times, it's not just that it's required, these are things that California has wanted to do for some time, and this is the proper impetus.
I'm going to have to ask you to wrap up, please.
Thank you. I won't say anything about slots. With respect to reimbursement rates, you've heard extensive testimony. Rates are so low that from the parent's perspective, they struggle to find a provider willing to accept the voucher without a significant parental copayment or a center willing to contract to meet more expensive needs such as infant care. It will not help to have slot increases if we don't increase the rates. And I just want to finally say that to improve access and truly deliver on the child care guarantee for current and former CalWORK families, we do need to address the low stage 1 uptake. There are things that can be done, including horizontal integration, data sharing, use of diversion for families that were overlooked, and ensuring a seamless transition from stage 1 to stage 2 child care. I would like to provide you with, as part of the CCDBG, a implementation paper that 38 organizations came together to suggest a plan going forward, and I will provide that to your sergeant.
Please, thank you very much, as well as a copy of your testimony if possible, because those last recommendations you made on stage 1 uptake, I think members of the committee would be very interested in, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
Just a reminder, as Senator Block mentioned earlier, I think all of you were told 2 minutes. We are also going to take public comment, and so we ask you to be prudent with your time. Moving on to Ms. Ariner.
Good afternoon again. I'm here on behalf of the SEIU Early Educator Apprenticeship Pilot Project, which we believe is a truly innovative workforce development effort. It allows the workforce development world to meet one of their primary goals, that of opening its doors to previously unrepresented sectors, particularly in terms of creating new apprenticeships. Meeting another primary goal, this apprenticeship focuses on a workforce predominantly comprised of women, specifically women of color, mothers, low-income women, female small business owners, and non-traditional female college students. Unlike other ECE workforce development initiatives, the apprenticeship offers a model that pairs increased professional development and training with commensurate increases in wages, a problem that continues to plague the ECE industry. Indeed, ECE is an industry that defies the laws of economics in terms of the fact that the enormous demand for ECE services has no impact on raising individual wages or industry salaries to meet that demand. Second, the SEIU Early Education Apprenticeship represents a model that can be efficiently and economically replicated across the state and across the country. We are going to be demonstrating the availability and strength of building collaborations. The apprenticeship utilizes widely available ECE community-based training resources such as the resource and referral agencies. We recognize the need for accessible, affordable access to higher education. The model integrates community colleges as partners in providing degree-applicable college coursework through the apprenticeship. We understand that the ECE workforce is comprised of many kinds of workers. The apprenticeship demonstrates the viability of the model not only for center-based workers, but also for home-based family child care providers, including both licensed and license-exempt. It acknowledges the need to increase the professionalism of the ECE workers across the board. The model provides a pathway to encourage license-exempt kinship providers to become licensed and thereby receive a significant higher reimbursement rate, which you heard about today, for subsidized children in their care. The grants, so far we have received grants in total of $1.1 million out of the workforce and development arena, everybody, not out of the child care arena. That's the beauty of having an apprenticeship program. We're going to be leveraging dollars that aren't in our system and bring them into our system. And we've received in-kind contributions of over $700,000 from the participants, meaning from the union, and from our partners, the Child Care Resource Center, and the Mexican American Opportunities Foundation. The pilot's going to be taking place, and it started already in Los Angeles, right? We are actually beginning to enroll both child care center workers as well as licensed workers at this time. And what the use of this money is for, the $1.4 million, is to allow us to be able to do the second and third year and to meet the wage requirement. Apprenticeship programs can provide all the training dollars and all of that, but they can't pay the wage increment. And so that's what we are asking you to do. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. We'll move on to R&R Network.
Hi, Linda Sato. Oops.
Push it once, and then the sergeant. There you go. And the sergeant now.
I'm Linda Sato with the California Child Care Resource and Referral Network. Speaking on behalf of Children Now, the R&R Network, and the Child Care Alliance of Los Angeles, who have submitted this request. We envision a high-capacity 21st century integrated and statewide childcare data system that seamlessly enables consumer education. And what I mean by consumer education is the free information about childcare providers, learning about programs that which they're eligible for, and other resources for family, caregivers, children, and in all ways that parents access information, so that's online, through mobile devices, or with the assistance of counselors and caseworkers. And we see that if that consumer education information linking with other information about the ability to apply and redetermine their eligibility in some cases for such services through those modes. And this would also provide easily accessible data about the childcare supply and demand for state and local agencies to analyze that information and use that to best serve children, California's children and families. This system will have the capacity to link and share with other data systems to keep up with modern technology and mobile needs of families and the workforce, and reflect national best practices and meet federal benchmarks. And so what we see is that this is an opportune time to leverage the work that was funded last year to put the disparate childcare information that was at the local level and that's being centralized now, and to use that database to its fullest potential to make the most of the opportunity to, when we have contact with parents, to add value and to the support that they receive by enabling the public dollars to be used more smartly, so that instead of lost time and opportunity using those archaic methods that takes time in search and just of the endless searches people do and the multiple times that people apply for programs, that we believe that a linked system of information enables decision makers, public agency staff, frontline workers, parents themselves to use that saved time in either offering more quality service or that benefits the consumer.
20 seconds.
Okay, so I'll just skip that. We propose that this database be built with additional functionality, adding a mobile solution, capture better demand data, ability for providers to upload in their own profile page that links with the workforce registry, so it acts as a portal for their records, and ability to have two-way communication, especially in situations of disaster or disaster preparedness. And the bulk of the request of this one-time fund is to build a locally designed eligibility and enrollment system for childcare subsidies that be connected, that these local centralized eligibility lists would be connected statewide so that it could be aggregated easily, and that the management of this system is not part of this one-time request, but we think that it would be a wise investment going forward.
Thank you very much, appreciate that. License exit rates, Child Care Alliance of Los Angeles, 2 minutes.
Good afternoon. My name is Donna Snaringer on behalf of the Child Care Alliance of Los Angeles. I'll just go really quickly through the fact that we support the Women's Caucus proposal, and I want to talk to you just a little bit about informal care arrangements and the important role that they play. I testified to this committee last year about these issues, and I'm happy to be back again, and we made a little bit of progress, but we have ways to go. Informal care arrangements are part of the continuum of choices families select as they're balancing work and parenting. In California, their exempt status from licensing requirement have given them the very interesting moniker of license exempt providers. Most parents, if not all of us, use this type of care as a regular part of our lives. I myself used an informal care provider when my daughter was an infant. My choice was to have my baby with a caregiver I knew personally and who I knew would care for her the way I would if I were not at work. And I think it's important we offer that to families in our subsidy system as well. Despite the critical role these caregivers play in care that many families need, these providers are often looked down upon because they're not part of the formal early learning system, but they are critical for families and a valid part of our continuum of care. California's reimbursement rate system pays poverty wages to these caregivers. License-exempt providers have been particularly hard hit by reimbursement rate reductions. During the Great Recession, these rates were held flat for a decade, and in addition to that, they faced a 30% reduction above and beyond. For low-income families, many of whom work non-traditional hours in service industries, this is often the only care that will meet their needs. The U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics estimates that among working poor, at least 1/3 of individuals are in non-traditional hour positions with frequently changing schedules. And that type of care can really only be provided with this kind of flexible, informal care. So I want to just give some concrete examples of the poverty wages we're paying. For a full-time provider in Los Angeles County who's caring for a school-age child in the evening, she provides care for 35 or more hours per week, and we pay her a monthly wage of $420.46 for a minimum of 150 hours per month. That breaks down to $2.80 per hour. In San Diego, these conditions would be much the same for a caregiver. In the same scenario, they'd make $407 for 150 hours of work, breaking down to $2.72 an hour. For a family friend or neighbor who cares for an infant, because they average less than 35 hours per week for part-time care, in Los Angeles County, we're paying $2.91 per hour to care for a baby. Obviously, I know I'm running out of time, but I just want you to imagine being a parent in the subsidy program, approaching someone to care for your baby and telling them you're going to pay them $3 an hour. I talked to a colleague in Washington, D.C., and she said, I paid more for my latte this morning.
Ooh.
You know, I think that this is really important care. I think this needs to be considered, and we really are supportive of the Women's Caucus proposal to increase those rates, and thank you.
Thank you very much, appreciate that. And quality rating improvement system,
Thank you, Madam Chair. On behalf of the ECE Coalition, Erin Gable with First 5 California, and I would like to present our request to expand the state's investment in professional development and quality improvement systems for all early learning professionals through the state's quality rating and improvement system, a new acronym relatively to all of us. Quality Rating Improvement System is QRIS. This proposal that I will outline today is one part of the coalition's three-part budget letter that you did receive, reiterating the call for rates, access, and as I will cover, quality infrastructure investments in this budget year in line with the Women's Caucus's $800 million budget request. California's QRIS is a systems-based approach to setting a tiered standard for quality childcare programs and then supporting individual childcare provider and childcare site in their quest to reach this quality standard. California's QRIS currently does each of the following. One, establishes a set of standards that define a high-quality child care setting for center and family home-based early learning programs. Two, supports early learning educators in all settings with increased training, coaching, compensation, and other instructional support so that they can be on a continuous improvement path. And then three, ensures information about quality in early learning settings and makes sure that's available for parents and for caregivers who are making these decisions. While the CSPP and infant toddler block grants that you're familiar with for the QRIS are modest and relatively new contributions to the complex array of state and local sources for professional development systems across the state, they provide a crucial and stable funding stream for what is an evolving local quality improvement system. The state funds ensure the full engagement of our local education agencies, higher education institutions, and all of the local funds who are currently funding professional development. The Race to the Top Early Learning Challenge grant from the feds had launched quite a bit of this effort statewide, and with its $75 million over 4 years is expiring this year. Without increasing these state block grants, we believe it will be difficult to strengthen and sustain these initiatives over time to provide the necessary support we see for all subsidized care providers in all settings to improve quality for all children. Our proposal, very quickly, is to ensure state investments continue to build on the expanding success of quality improvement systems statewide. We propose increasing the CSPP QRS block grant by $25 million, increasing the one-time $25 million infant toddler block grant into a $35 million ongoing program to ensure our infant and toddler providers are adequately supported. We would specifically also ask for some statutory changes and to put into statute the infant toddler block grant, the details of which we'd be happy to discuss with the committee as this conversation moves forward. Thank you.
Appreciate that very much. Questions of committee members? Senator Monning, and then followed by Senator Allen.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you all for the presentations. It creates a good composite of complementary investment recommendations. My question goes to Ms. Asado on the consumer education database. It's a one-time cost of $15 million to establish the database. Do you have any information of what the operational costs would be once established, and